Start for Trice. That's Chase, and what a start for Cincinnati. And he has the football for Tahuba. Bijan Robinson, he's going to have his first touchdown. Gibbs out of the backfield right away. Oh, yeah, there's no question that he was grabbed. They got ridiculous. They got Gibbs one-on-one with Andrew Van Ginkel in space, and that was it.
And this is, again, it's man-to-man. It's one-on-one, and he's underneath. He loses his balance. Block Bowers is one of those guys that has a – and this is –
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast presented by the Fantasy Holics, coming at you live on the Fantasy Holics YouTube and X profiles. I'm Bo. That is Brant, as the screen says there in front of you. Brant, today we figured we'd get together and we'd talk some guys that just missed their marks last year, guys that we were excited about, guys that there had some hype about, and guys that just fell flat on their faces and left us holding the bag more often than not. If these were guys that we went out and they acquired or potentially reached to get them above their draft mark. And now here it is in hindsight, we're looking back and a lot of people, including us, were fools for some of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. These are just a couple guys, not too many of them that like I said, I went out and I traded for the first one I'm going to talk about. I traded for him in both of both of my main dynasty leagues. And then the other guy, I fell on the hype train. I know you never quite jumped on board. But yeah, those are the two guys that I'm going to talk about later. And the hype was there for them and everything else. And we're going to talk about just why they didn't miss their mark and what we possibly could see from them next year.
Yeah, and obviously it feels worth noting since our last episode, there were two more head coaching vacancies that came open. The Miami Dolphins separated with Mike McDaniel, and then Mike Tomlin stepped down from the Steelers. Definitely some big holes there. Steelers' job is going to be in demand. I wouldn't be shocked if the Miami job isn't in demand as well, just because of the weather. But we went from looking at an offseason where we weren't sure how many head coaching openings we'd see to, 9 feels like an awful lot. It's like a quarter of the league is looking for new head coaches. So definitely going to be a busy offseason here. Definitely get excited to talk about some of those pieces once they start to fall. Kind of feels like the league's waiting on Harbaugh. We'll see where that is. And then on the other side of the coin, we got the playoffs to still talk about. So we'll talk about that as we end the show. But let's jump into these guys who, again, just finished just wide of where we expected them to, Brant.
Okay, absolutely. I'm gonna jump it off with a wide receiver that everybody thought was going to be. I do say everybody because a lot of people were high on this guy going into this year, and that's Rome Odunze. He started off, he had some great, first couple games started off really good. Looked like he was going to be, 9, 11, 7, and 8 targets going into their bye weeks, seeing over 90% of the snaps, and looked like he was going to be, a prime guy to break out for in Chicago with that offense. And then he just didn't quite live up to that. As he slowly, after the bye week, he slowly started to see his snap shares dwindle. And about 4 weeks before his injury, 78, 76, 78, 80% of snaps, seeing 3, 10, 6, 9, and 6 targets. And then he saw 0. And the targets just weren't quite accurate with Caleb Williams there. And after he came back from injury, we slowly started seeing him fall down in the pecking order. Right now, I honestly think that he might be 4th in the pecking order right now as receiving, as you got DJ Moore, Luther Burden, who I'm going to talk about in just a second on why Rome could be sliding next year as well. DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Colson Loveland, and then you have Rome Odunze kind of in that check down order. And you got to remember, he was not drafted by Ben Johnson. He was not drafted to be a Ben Johnson guy. He was not drafted for the type of offense that Ben Johnson wants to run. And in Detroit, you never really saw a big-bodied receiver like he is, 6'3", what is he, 225. you never quite saw that type of guy. Doesn't move pre-snap 214. He doesn't quite move as much pre-snap. Luther Burden was drafted to be that Amon-Ra St. Brown type of guy there for Ben Johnson. And I don't think Rome's going to be in the conversation as a top 24 wide receiver after this season. Maybe if DJ Moore leaves, maybe. But I think you're going to be talking more of Colston Loveland being a top 5 tight end and Luther Burden being that breakout guy next year with this offense. We're slowly starting to see that as the Bears continue to roll through the playoffs. So Rome's a guy that I'm going to try to move a little bit off. I'm going to try to move off this season. I love what Rome can do. His skill set's amazing. He does have good hands. I just don't think he's quite the fit for this offense.
Yeah, this Chicago Bears offense and where they're headed definitely has Colston Loveland feeling like a Trey McBride level player next season. Just the copious amounts of volume he's getting it. And, you talk about a Bears team who really doesn't get going until the second half this season, regardless, second half of games. Rome Odunze, I don't believe, had his first target in this game until the second half. So kind of felt like he was a non-factor early, and that kind of almost makes you wonder, is he just definitely not part of Ben Johnson, because there's obviously those scripted plays for him weren't there. Like that was not somebody they were looking to get the ball into his hands early, which does make you a little bit hesitant on him. Like you said, moving into next year, it definitely feels like potentially that window to sell high maybe passed on him, which is hard to say about a young player getting ready to go into his third season. But it'll definitely be interesting if there's any chance that DJ Moore gets a deal reworked or anything like that. That offense may be one where if it's not Colston Loveland, I may not want to trot any of those guys out next year with any kind of confidence. So yeah, it'd definitely be interesting to see how this offseason plays out for those guys, Brant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, I'm coming at you with the tight end position first. This is a guy that I will say, Brant, you and I never necessarily fell in love with. The offseason hype was definitely there for this guy. I saw a lot of people trying to sell high on him, and congratulations if you were one of those people that were able to accomplish that task. But I'm going to talk about Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a guy that a lot of people were talking about coming into this season could be a top 5, top 10 tight end, with opposite of Brian Thomas Jr. and whatever role it ended up being for Travis Hunter. And a lot of people were very, very high on Brenton Strange this year. He finished his tight end 23. And I know it's really easy to say he only played 12 games and missed time due to injury. But in that 12 games, he had 60 targets, 46 receptions, 540 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. If you average those numbers out and make it a 17-game season for him, his 17-game pace would have been 85 targets, 65 receptions, 765 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns, which would have been good enough to put him at tight end 13, tied with George Kittle on the season, who also missed 6 games. So, those of us that had or invested in Brenton Strange this season definitely feel betrayed, let down by those numbers. And again, as you look at next season with the Jacksonville Jaguars, that offense was skyrocketing towards the end of the season. Brenton Strange's value never went up with the rest of that team. Jacoby Myers under contract again next year. Came out today that Travis Hunter is indeed going to play both sides of the ball still next year. Brian Thomas Jr. hopefully gets things figured out there. It still, to me, feels very, very far down in the pecking order for Brenton Strange. I have to imagine if ETN comes back next year, he's even behind ETN when it comes to passing games. So this is just a guy that I didn't get on board with this year, and I just don't see a clear path for him being a top 10 tight end next year in this offense the way it sits now. And again, similarly to what you brought up with Rome Odunze, Brenton Strange wasn't the tight end that was drafted by Liam Cohen, and this is a very deep tight end class. That's one thing that we have to look forward to for fantasy. It feels like is this rookie class incoming does have a plethora of tight ends. So it'll be interesting to see if Brenton Strange is listed as the tight end 1 this time next season.
Yeah, absolutely. We thought that tight end, we saw Ingram seeing so many targets and everything else prior to his departure. So yeah, we definitely did. I know Strange battled some injuries this year a little bit. I don't know if he actually missed times. I know he was
12 games. He played 12 games.
He did play 12. Okay. So it was just that kind of guy that didn't slot into what was moving forward. And it'll be real interesting. I think they're going to be looking for a guy that can play the slot role a little bit more, such as I'm going to use your guy just because I do know he's a free agent, Kyle Pitts type guy. I don't think that's who they're going to go after, but that's the type of tight end that they're going to need.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts will be very clearly the tight end one on the free agency market if Atlanta is slow enough to let him out there. So it'll be interesting to see how that slides out. But yeah, it does feel like that tight end position in Jacksonville was a letdown this year. And there were some other tight ends that came in and got run at times too, but Britton Strange definitely didn't live up.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. My next guy is going to be one of the biggest hype trains preseason. He looked great in the preseason games. He looked phenomenal. A lot of people are starting to skyrocket him up the draft board, and that's Jacoby Krosky Merritt, or Bill, as most people called him. He never quite could gain traction with this offense. And you saw it at the first couple weeks. He was starting to see more snaps. It was slowly going up. But his biggest games came off of some burst runs where he was averaging well over 4 yards a carry, but he was having burst runs to get into the end zone. I mean, one of his best games, he finished his RB5. He had 14 carries for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, averaging almost 8 yards per game. His RB7 game, 11 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, you're going to finish high up there when you're averaging that many yards per carry. But he didn't do that all season. I mean, you saw times 2.5 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. It was a lot. I mean, and you know, his snap share slowly was starting to trickle. And then you saw him get beat out by Chris Rodriguez, and Jeremy McNichols was starting to see the field more as well. And then next year, you're going to see Austin Eckler possibly come back. Now, all 3 of those names I did mention, they are on the free agent list. They are possibly not going to be back there in Washington, but I'll talk about that here in a minute. Here's one of the biggest things of it. 13 targets on the year, 9 receptions for only 68 yards, did not find the end zone. He is not part of the passing game in Washington. He's 24 years old. He is, he's still, I'm not going to say he's up there in age, but he is definitely, he's not a young running back that you see coming out of drafts and everything else. So you could see them going after one. He wasn't drafted very high, but this hype train was so crazy and he just could never catch traction. He was only over 50% of the snaps 4 times this year, and 2 of those games were the ones where he did burst out. When you have a great burst in the first quarter, yeah, they're probably going to ride the hot hand. But when he wasn't the hot hand, he did not see the ball very much. Not to mention, you're getting a rushing quarterback back next year with Jaden Daniels. Yeah, it will look good with the read option, but it's probably not going to be Krosky Merritt. It's not going to be Bill. I do think he has the potential to possibly move up that depth chart and be the starter next year if they're not able to add a name. But I do think that they're going to be big players in the running back market and running back draft this year.
It's also worth noting, Brant, we don't know who the offensive coordinator is going to be in Washington, which could massively change things as well. You could get somebody in there who doesn't value running back at all, and you just have a complete committee and they go get 2 or 3 guys, guys like Miles Sanders types who are going to be available for dirt cheap after missing time with injuries this year. And it could be one of those things where you just stay away from that backfield altogether. And I will say the only thing I'm going to add on JCM is the early season hype on him was so unreal. We talked about it on one of our episodes, the trades that went down for him, and it was insane the amount of volume and value people were acquiring using Jacoby Krosky Merritt as their massive piece in the side. So again, those people that sold on the hype are extremely happy right now. Those that bought on the hype are extremely sad. So 100%, he missed the mark.
Yep, absolutely. And I did fail to mention one other name. Debo is also there, who also takes some of the snaps in the backfield as well.
Absolutely. Speaking of Debo, who's a wide receiver, I'm going to talk about a wide receiver that was a terrible pivot there because they have nothing in common. I'm going to talk about a wide receiver that coming off of his rookie season was massively hyped in his offense. We all thought he was a focal point of his team. I'm going to talk about Ladd McConkey of the Los Angeles Chargers this year. Now, Ladd McConkey still finished as a top 30 wide receiver, so it's not to bag on him too hard. But when you talk about draft ranks and where this player was drafted, he was being drafted as a top 12 wide receiver this year, purely based on his volume alone. It's not like there was a touchdown regression that hurt him this year. The problem is The Chargers brought back Keenan Allen. Quentin Johnston took a step forward in his career this year. Oronde Gaston became involved this year. Kamani Vidal was relatively relevant out of the backfield. Trey Harris came on strong down the second half of the season, and all that added to was 18 less receptions for Ladd McConkey, and it just goes to show you that volume is key, is king in this offense. And again, I think Ladd McConkey kind of showed us his rookie season. I think that's his ceiling. We drafted him well above his rookie season. I think there was a couple times where you and I even discussed that this off season that it felt like a reach taking him at his ceiling where he finished as a rookie. And again, the writing's on the wall. They spent decent draft capital last year on a tight end. They spent decent draft capital last year on Trey Harris. I do expect Keenan Allen to be gone, but there is still a first-round wide receiver in Quentin Johnston who has big playability. Who we've seen Justin Herbert still, regardless of how many times he drops the ball, still have some faith in him. Ladd McConkey has to have extremely high targets for him to be relevant. He only had 6 less targets this year than he had last year. He had 112 last year, 106 this year. The big issue here, he only had 66 receptions this year. That's down 18 from the 84 he had last season. Touchdowns, like I said, went down by 1 touchdown. But again, when you talk about a player and where you're drafting them, you don't want to draft the player at his ceiling. Ladd McConkey is a perfect example of last year, people reaching and drafting a player at their ceiling and being disappointed with what that produces. It would have been very easy for this episode, Brant, for us to sit down and talk about guys like Brian Thomas or, Justin Jefferson, who were taken in the first 2 rounds of startup drafts or, extremely expensive capital to go acquire. Those guys obviously missed the mark. But when you talk about a guy like Ladd McConkey, who come out, had such a predominant role in his offense as a rookie, you don't necessarily expect that to take a huge hit when you add a aging out vet like Keenan Allen or a couple young rookies late in the draft. You expect Ladd McConkey's value to still be there, and we just saw the bottom drop out for him this year. Again, if you can draft him around the wide receiver 30 range, I think that's a really good, comfortable spot for him. But drafting him inside the top 20 wide receivers is just a no-go for me after what we saw this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly believe the run game is going to get a huge shot up next year with the linemen coming back. They had a lot of injuries on the line. So I think his targets are probably going to come down. His receptions may go up a little bit or stay very level with where they're at, just because that they might have more time. Herbert might have a little more time to push the ball downfield to him. But the target's going to come down because I do think that run game is going to be really big too. So I'm all on board with him, staying in that wide receiver 30 range like you and me spoke about preseason, where just his ceiling was he was in the top 12 of wide receivers being drafted, and it just wasn't going to be there. There's too many targets, too many mouths to feed. They spent too much in the first round. We all know hardballs like to run the ball. So, I think right there in that wide receiver 30 range is definitely doable. Maybe you could sneak him up into 24 because the offense might be a little bit better than when we saw sometimes this year, but that's about it.
Again, I don't think we can necessarily pin that at this point either. That's also a team that's going to be having a different play caller on the offensive side of the ball. They fired Greg Roman yesterday. So, again, we'll have to wait and see what that looks like. But, yeah, you spend capital on a round 2 running back like Omari and Hampton. He's going to get some work next year like you alluded to. Tight end Oronde Gaston had some breakout games this year. Trey Harris, like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see how the pieces fall to that, but I'm just not comfortable drafting Ladd McConkey any higher than wide receiver 30.
Okay, absolutely.
All right, Brett, let's talk about these playoff games this weekend. Last little bit here, just because I want to touch base on some of the teams that are still in this. We'll talk about the lines and stuff and where they're at, and then we'll move on.
Phenomenal wild card weekend. We did see almost every game was great, except for the last 2 really were kind of drags. But yeah, it was definitely a good wild card weekend.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll start with Saturday's slate, the 4:30 Eastern time game. The Buffalo Bills traveling to Denver. Yesterday, the Bills were favored in this game. Today, they are not. It's a 1.5-point line for the Broncos, which really means this game's pretty much even, basically. Got a 45.5-point line on it, over under. I think this is one of the best games of the weekend slate, at least on paper. You talk about a Josh Allen team and how good that Broncos defense is. I think this is going to be an extremely fun contest this weekend. What are your expectations for that game as quick as you can get it out, Brant?
I think it's going to be a great game. I got Josh Allen pulling it out. I got him making his run to continue. But I do think it's going to be a great game. I saw a meme earlier today, and I wanted to bring it up just because it made me chuckle. It said Surtain is a wide receiver one lockdown. Eraser, and it says, joke's on them. The Bills don't have a wide receiver one. So who's he going to erase? But I do think it's going to be a very fun game to watch. I think it's going to be back and forth, and Josh Allen's not going to go away easy.
Yeah, it definitely should be a good contest. I actually lean the home team on that one. I'm going to go Denver just because I think Sean Payton at home with that defense is going to be electric. Saturday night, we do have your Seahawks playing host to the 49ers and a 7-point favorite for your Seattle Seahawks, 45.5-point line on that one as well. Your thoughts on that game?
Get in there and take the under now because the Niners have held the Seahawks to the 2 lowest scoring totals they've had all year. You saw 0 touchdowns last time from the Niners last time they played. And we all know that Seattle has no problem kicking 6 field goals to win a game. We've seen them do it against Old Man Rivers. Obviously, I'm taking my Seahawks. I'm taking it in a low scoring, pound it out, beat each other up game, and I'm going to take my Seahawks at home.
I'm going to roll with you on this one. I'm going to take your Seahawks with the caveat that they have to keep Christian McCaffrey under 100 yards rushing. He hits that. I think the Niners win. But I think with Kittle, this 49ers team is going to be hard-pressed on offense to move the ball. So I do think you guys get this one done. Again, I guess at home. So rolling with the 2 home teams on Saturday. Sunday, you start off with the Texans at the Patriots, 40.5 for the over-under. The line is Patriots by 3. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think the Texans try to come out, pin their ears back, and try to get to Drake May, but I think Drake May ultimately turns this one in. And I think the game's actually not going to be as close as what this line's looking like. I think the Patriots open it up because their defense is pretty good, and I'm going to take Drake May over C.J. Stroud right now with the way that they're playing, and no Nico Collins, most likely.
Yeah, I think I kind of talked about it with you the other day at work. I think the Texans remind me a lot of your Seahawks. Very, 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 very good defense. They're going to be hamstrung by their offense. The one difference is you guys are playing a banged-up 49ers. They're playing a Patriots team that's pretty healthy right now. Ramondre Stevenson playing some of the best football of his career. We just saw Ashton Jeanty shred this Texans team a couple weeks back. I do think this is a good game, but I am going to go Patriots as well. I think that 3-point line is absolutely perfect. I think this comes down to a walk-off field goal.
Okay.
And then we end this weekend with the St. Louis Rams traveling to Chicago to play the Bears. 48.5-point line, and the Rams are favored by 3.5.
I think this is going to be a crazy game. I think a lot of people are counting the Rams. I think a lot of people are counting the Bears out with how good the Rams are overall. And the Bears having trouble playing football before the fourth quarter. But the cold, I think, is going to play somewhat of a factor. I know, Stafford's played plenty of games in the cold, but I do think it's going to play a factor here. And I think the Bears are going to be able to keep it close. I think the defense will be able to keep them in the game as well. And if the Bears come out and maybe decide to play football in the first half, I think that they're going to pull this one out. But I'm going to lean with the Rams on winning this. But I do think the Bears have a good shot of taking this one.
Yeah, I think the Bears are going to be riding the emotional high after knocking out their division rivals last week. Another contest where they got, the throttle put on them in the first half. Packers didn't put their foot on the throats, allowed the Bears to come back. I don't think that happens this week. Stafford's going to play at an MVP level, come out and dispel the cold rumors. This is a guy that played his most of his professional career in Detroit. It's cold in Detroit this time of year. Granted, I understand they were in a stadium, but not necessarily going to be affected by the cold this week. I think the Bears start off too slow to catch up to the Rams. Sean McVay is too good of a coach. I don't think he allows the Rams to come back. I think this one's all Rams all day. And I think the Rams move on pretty comfortably in this one. So,
okay. Should be a pretty good weekend. Looks like every game, is between that 4-point spread besides the Seahawks game, but that's a divisional matchup. I don't know where the 7-point spread's coming from because I don't believe that at all. I believe it's going to come down to that. Could be the closest game of the weekend, as it always is with the Rams with the Niners and Seahawks. So you can throw the Rams in there when they play divisional games too. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a very fun weekend of football. And I think that does it for us this week. So as always, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.